Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to start our Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee meeting now, and welcome on the 23rd of September. I hope if you're watching online, it'll likely be at a later stage because this morning we have the technical problem of not live streaming, but we are recording it, and therefore hopefully as soon as the meeting is finished, if you have an interest to watch it, then I hope you're picking it up at that point. And thank you for doing so. Welcome those of you who are joining us online as committee members and those who are joining us for various reports as they arise. It's good to see you there and thank you. And we have a range of officers and chief officers in the chamber who I would ask if you could be kind enough, please, to just introduce yourself when you start picking up any points. That would be very helpful. Thank you. So we're going to make a start, and we've got some very interesting, very important reports in front of us today, covering the latest revenue monitoring of the Council's finances, and also social care, the annual report from the Director Chief Officer of Social Care, which is going to be very interesting to go through, as well as Safeguarding's annual report. So really, really interesting reports. I know we've enjoyed and found very informative. Maybe enjoyment is not the key word when you're wading through Peter and John's finance report, but it's very informative. So thank you for all the hard work that goes into it. So apologies for absence. We have, I think, two, is it, Robert?
Yes, Chair. We've got Councillor Pavia and Councillor Buckler.
Great. They're absence noted, and we're moving on to declarations of interest. Have we any, Robert?
Nothing so far, no, Chair.
And nothing on the public open forum there?
No one today.
So we'll move straight on to item 4 in the agenda, and that is the revenue monitoring update to scrutinise the revenue position for services falling within the committee's remit. And there are 3 attached appendices to the report, which are very full of details. So again, thank you for pulling all this together and doing so very clearly. And I'm going to hand across to, I don't know whether Peter or John, you're going to pick up initially and how you want to pick that up. Beg your pardon. Councillor Callard, online, I can see you now. You were slightly lost in the in whatever hedgerow you might be sitting in there right now, so my apologies. But if you would want to introduce the report, Councillor Callard, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I can't be there with you today. I'm presenting an update of the progress against the Council's revenue budget for the 2025-2026 financial year, so that the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee can scrutinise the revenue budget forecast for the financial year. The 2025-2026 budget round reflected the sustained period of increased demand, complexity and costs within school ALM provision, adult social care, which were addressed through significant base budget increases. Full Council approved a revenue expenditure budget of £236,778,000 for the 2025-2026 financial year. The latest forecast against this budget at the directorate level is shown in the table at 4.6 in the report. Specific cost pressures remain within social care, despite significant investment as part of the base budget for 2025-26. In adult services, this is driven by a rising demand for high-cost care packages, particularly in placements. While reablement efforts are expanding, they're not yet sufficient to offset the overall need for care. Service and practice changes are beginning to mitigate costs, but further progress is needed. In children's services, although placement costs remain stable, financial strain has emerged due to the need to sustain family support following the withdrawal of certain Welsh Government grants. Maintaining this support is crucial to prevent increased placement costs and to ensure better outcomes for children. Both adults and children's services are vulnerable to fluctuations in demand, especially as winter approaches. In housing and homelessness, the opening of Seven View offers some immediate cost mitigation, but pressures within private leasing through increased costs and rental debt arrears present ongoing financial challenges that require further mitigation. Fleet maintenance is forecasting a £171,000 overspend, driven by increased fuel costs, hire charges, and EV charger inspection and maintenance. The service is actively monitoring vehicle utilisation to reduce this overspend by year end. Passenger transport faces a net overspend of £392,000, driven by a £265,000 shortfall in school transport against the catchment area savings planned for 2025-26. Changes in pupil numbers and route safety have limited the ability to fully realise expected savings. Internal operators are also under strain due to reduced income from contract changes and delays in adjusting vehicle and staffing costs. While grant income has helped offset some of the pressure, further mitigation options are being explored, with more accurate figures expected once September pupil numbers and contracts are confirmed. Funding for the increased cost of employers' national insurance contributions was not included within the Welsh Government grant settlement. For the purposes of budget setting, it was assumed that the additional £3.32 million pressure relating to the increase in direct employers' national insurance contributions would be fully funded. Confirmation was received in July that Monmouthshire will receive £2.51 million of funding, a shortfall of £811,000, or 24%. The council set aside a contingency budget of £850,000 as part of its budget setting that will need to be drawn upon to address this shortfall, and this is reflected within the forecasts. While it has been confirmed that the funding will transfer into the Welsh Government grant base for 2026-2027, the recurrent cost pressure will also need to be considered as part of the budget process for 26-27. The NJC pay award for 2025-2026 was agreed in July at 3.2%, which is marginally above the budgeted assumption of 3.1%. The resultant additional cost pressure of £100,000 will need to be met from within existing service budgets, with an increase in base budget pressure considered for 2026-2027. The NJC have agreed that from the 1st of April 2026, spinal column point 2 will be permanently deleted from the NJC pay spine. Whilst this is not expected to result in an immediate cost pressure, it may be necessary to review existing pay band structures given the erosion in the pay differential between the bands. Welsh Government have confirmed a 4% pay award will be implemented for teaching staff from September 2025. Whilst this increase is above the Council's budget assumption of 3.1% increase, Welsh Government have confirmed that they will continue with their recent commitment of providing additional grant funding in year to meet the increased costs falling to local government. As a result, no budget cost pressure is anticipated. Underspends within waste and decarbonisation, alongside ongoing staff vacancies across some services and outperformance of council tax income targets, have all helped mitigate the overspends reported. Our current forecasts are projecting an end-of-year overspend of £533,000, representing 0.2% of our revenue budget. Compared to previous years, where we have seen significant early in-year pressure, this represents a significant improvement. Of particular concern are school balances. The overall level of school reserves are currently forecast to move further into deficit by £2,835,000 by the end of the 2025-2026 financial year, to a collective deficit balance of nearly £7 million. This forecast draw is £120,000 above the budget schools have set for the year. All schools that forecast a deficit balance at financial year end are required to bring forward budget recovery plans. Close monitoring and support continues to be given to these schools, as well as those at risk of entering a deficit position over the medium term, to ensure that the proposed actions to address the medium-term budget challenges are instigated. I look forward to the questions of the committee on the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Callard. That's a very comprehensive overview of the report, really helpful. Much appreciate that. And it will allow us to move into any additional points that Peter or Jonathan you'd want to raise before we then open for questions. John?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Davis, Head of Finance. I think Councillor Callard has taken us through the key points really well this morning already. I think I just probably wanted to outline just those remaining risks as we move forward. I think naturally, as we're progressing now into nearly into the second half of the financial year, we look towards what can further impact us from a financial perspective, and what the services are seeing within their operational delivery. So I think initially, Councillor Carr's right to highlight the school's reserve balances as the key risk for us. If there is any further movement on that negatively, that's got the potential to impact us quite significantly in terms of our balance sheet strength. So it's the one thing that is highest on the list for the remainder of the year. We're working with all of those schools in deficit through their budget recovery plans, but I think, as you'll see from the appendix, we've also brought in a risk category for those schools to highlight those which are of particular concern and those which continue to remain at the top of our list. So we are meeting regularly with those schools of concern. Those are in the diary over the coming months, and both Councillor Callard and the Cabinet Member for Education is part of that, as you would expect. Just briefly across the other risks that we continue to monitor, I think members of the committee will realise that inflation is currently tracking slightly higher than we would have hoped for when we set the budget. That is expected to rise further before it dampens slightly over the coming months. So that is something that services are having to deal with and manage as part of their budgets. Alongside that, I think Councillor Callard mentioned the national insurance employers' increases. Whilst we've managed the in-year position on the direct impact of those cost increases, services are also having to deal with the indirect impact of those through increased contracted costs and negotiations for contracts that are happening at the moment. So that is having an impact, and that will have to be mitigated by services as well. The final thing, I think, just from me, is in terms of our budgeted savings targets for the year. Whilst we're currently running and tracking at over 90% delivery of those, I think recent experience would tell us that that may fall back slightly towards the end of the year. I think overall we've delivered between around 80 and 85% traditionally of those targets. So we have to be mindful of that, and that will be a focus for us as well from a financial standpoint as we go through the next 6 or so months. So I think, Chair, just to sum up, I think whilst I think it is a positive position for this first financial update, certainly compared to where we've been over recent years. I think it's cautious optimism from our perspective as a finance function as we move into the next reporting period. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And it's certainly important that we bear in mind that we still have plenty of uncertainties out there that we're all trying to navigate through. And we really appreciate the very strong efforts that everyone's making to try and ensure that we do that. So thanks to the officers for all that hard work. And yeah, I'm going to open it to questions from committee members. I see Councillor Strong with his hand up.
Yep, thanks very much. And thanks for the report and the supplementary piece there, Jonathan. 3 from me. The first one's more by way of a request than a question. Each time on these reports, we get very useful charts and so on showing where our spend goes. So we got the one on page 24, 25, showing the very large proportion that goes on social care, education, and so on. Can I ask that we look at the possibility of producing a simplified version to go out with the council tax bills, pie charts and that sort of thing? because I guess not one resident in 1,000 is going to wade through the papers like we do, and a huge number of people have a very, very limited idea of where all our money goes. I know last year we sent out stuff about foster care, and that of course should continue. But if we could put in another leaflet, that would be very useful. I know that to send out a leaflet on its own costs a huge amount of money, but to put it in with the council tax bills, I don't suppose it will ease the pain, but at least it will have more informed pain coming out from it. So that's the first, that's a request really. Second one, we got a reference as always to Castlegate. We've got a 90k overspend there, but prospects for improvement. Have there been any development since the report was compiled that we can look forward to? And thirdly, reference to savings from vacancies that we always look at. What we can't see from the report really is how far are those vacancies what you might call structural or planned to do with reorganisation? How far are they part of the normal churn, people leaving, and there's a delay until they replaced? I mean, a natural delay, or it might be a longer delay due to difficulty in getting qualified staff. So how far structural, how far unplanned? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Strong. And I don't know who wants to pick up with that. I like the use of a new expression, more informed pain, which is, I'd hate to think that's our brand, but we bring you more informed pain. But anyway, the point is a very well made one. I don't think that really needs a reply first of the points right now, other than to simply, could I ask you to take that on and see if we could actually implement that? It looks like a very good suggestion. But yes, do you want to address those particular points, John?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the questions. I think just initially on the council tax billing, we do link within our bills to a section on our website that holds all of that information. Should residents want to go in and have a look at that. I'll take the point around whether there's something more simple than that we can produce hard copy, because I appreciate not everyone will have the ability to go and view that. So I think it's a good point, and we can certainly take that back and have a look at it in preparation for 26-27 billing. In terms of the next two questions, I think given we have the chief officers with us today, I'll probably hand over to Peter for Castlegate, Chair, and to Matt Gatehouse for the second question on the vacancies, if that's okay. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. So who wants to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in the natural order of things. So if I've caught the question correctly, it was just a question of understanding, I guess, as to whether the forecast is reflective of where we stand at the moment and how we sort of envisage the rest of the year playing out. Is that fair? Yeah. So I think as the report alludes to, we're falling slightly short of budgeted forecasts, both on NLP and Castlegate. It's in part borne by some of the vacancies that we've got at the minute, and obviously I think as the committee understands, because it gets separate report in terms of our commercial investments through the year. So to the extent that we've got vacancies, that leads to business rates, service charges being borne by the council, because obviously those lets are not tenanted. So we're continuing to actively market. I think in terms of Castlegate, I know I've signed off just in recent days and last couple of weeks. Some further tenancies being secured, more in the flexi space that's been developed from within Castlegate, and I think we're seeing a lot of interest in that, a continuing interest, which I think is positive to see, and it's probably not a surprise, I guess, to the extent that businesses see that flexible use of space as a good stepping stone for business growth. I think it's been referred to previously. I think the remaining space within Castlegate is a little bit more difficult to work with. because I think those that have got a broader understanding of the building, and I guess in a post-Mytel era, after they left, there's a lot of high eve sort of warehouse space, and so it's a case of being able to work with that and taking opportunity, I guess, and we have in the last couple of years been able to secure expansions for existing tenants and being able to move some of those tenancies around in the floor space, such as to free up more usable, lettable space. So I think we're only running at about, from memory, about 30,000 square foot of remaining floor area to occupy. We're getting towards the level of letting that we want to return to, which would be at 95%. I think we're running at about 90 at the moment, from memory. NLP is in a pretty secure position. I think it's for those who again know the site and sort of frequent it. There is just that one significant letting that you can see from the roadside that is still vacant. We've had a couple of interests in recent months, but they haven't materialised to anything of substance. But we're continuing to actively market that. I don't think there's any market concern in terms of the tenancies that we hold across both sites. That still remains strong, and if anything, as I said earlier, the existing tenants, where those opportunities arise, particularly in Castlegate, they are looking at expansion. So I think in the round, I'm comfortable, notwithstanding the fact we're just carrying a small overspend currently, as explained. But I am confident that through continued marketing, we will be able to make further gains.
Thanks, Peter. Just that other question on vacancies, and Matthew Gatehouse, would you want to pick that one up, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Strong. For the benefit of those watching the recording, Matthew Gatehouse, Chief Officer, People, Performance and Partnerships. So there are a number of different elements to this, and I've been doing some analysis prompted by a previous question from the committee. There's still a couple of gaps to plug in relation to that. When we look at our systems, there are presently 733 vacant posts in the council. I do have to qualify that, though, because not all of those posts have an associated budget. And to give a practical example of that, I know within one of my teams, they have 3 jobs within a certain area, but only 2 of those posts at any one time will have an allocated budget. So it's used as part of a career development approach where we might bring someone in on apprentice or graduate post. They then have the opportunity to progress, but at any one time, one of those posts will be vacant. So it's not quite as straightforward as saying we have these number of posts that exist that are vacant. There's more of a nuance behind that.
Matthew, could I just ask you, and don't mean to interrupt but your thread, but while you're on that number, could you just give us a good steer on how many overall employees we have within the council?
Yes, including schools, a head count of around 4,100, and I'll have to check the exact figure in terms of sort of full-time equivalent, but that's sort of below 3,000 when we look at the full-time equivalent rate. I'll check the exact figure and update the committee on that, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
What I would add then in terms of that, all teams have a vacancy factor built into their budget, which allows for sort of natural turnover, and the fact that as soon as an individual leaves, they're not immediately replaced. So there's a period of time. And then the other factor we have in this space, which has been in place for the last sort of 2 years because of the budget pressures, is that every vacancy outside of schools' delegated budgets has to be signed off by either myself, Pip Green, our head of HR, Peter Davis as Deputy Chief Exec, or Paul Matthews. And that just means we're making sure that teams take a very considered approach to each vacancy that arises we're not taking on board undue risk, but equally we are very mindful in each recruitment decision we make, the effect on services and the effect on budgets.
Councillor Strong, and did you want to follow up on any of those points?
Okay, just very brief, very happy with those answers. I guess the one about the council tax bills, probably as much for Councillor Sandals as member for engagement, probably liaising with Councillor Callard on that one and the finance staff. Thanks for the update on Castlegate and indeed the leisure park. It's comforting to better report that when we get asked that sort of thing by local residents, as we frequently do. And then from Matt Gatehouse, yeah, it's always more complicated than you think, but that's useful information. Thank you.
Peter, yes.
Just one point, and I think as the committee understands, we separately bring a report into the committee in terms of our commercial and property investments, and that will be received by the committee later in the year. I think it's pretty well timed. I know on the one hand the work programme for the committee is pretty stacked, but I think it's coming in sort of February, March time, which I think will actually work quite well, given us going up towards outturn. So it plays well into the point that you've raised.
Great, that's really helpful. And just without continuing on this point about how we explain better the expenditure in council tax bills, I think John, you exemplified the point really by saying that if you put a link on a written hard copy, I guess not many people have the time or the inclination to go away and at that point go and follow the link. Whereas if it's actually in the print on the hard copy, it's right there for them to be able to see. So it sounds like a really, really good suggestion by Councillor Strong. So thank you. And yeah, I'm looking at hands up. I see Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, officers. On the Newport Leisure Park and Castlegate, I see reasons given for increased costs have been electricity or energy as an overspend. I was just wondering, do we have solar panels on those sites, or are we considering them for the future use? The second question is on car parks. I note there's £109,000 overspend there. Are we predicting a further budget cost with the recruitment, I believe, of 2 new enforcement officers? Does that come under that budget? And finally, the item on Tour of Britain, the very successful Tour of Britain. I saw that there was a contribution cost to hosting the event, which I just wondered whether there was any work being done on the value that it actually brought into the county. So for Monmouthshire businesses, I know in Usk businesses reported doing incredibly well. So it would be useful to know if there was any prediction made on the value of the event in case we're hosting similar events in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. Who wants to pick those up? Electricity charges, energy charges are always a big issue.
Apologies, Councillor Howells. I was just making a note. Can you just confirm on your first question? I'll come back on the second one.
Are there solar panels on the Castlegate and Newport Leisure Park?
Yeah, so...
Or are you considering them?
Yeah, so I think we've had assessments undertaken previously on Castlegate, and I'm looking back in time, and Deborah Howells is sat at the back as a former head of landlord services. But my recollection was that the structure of the roof within Castlegate lent itself well to solar panel installation. Notwithstanding that, the running costs of the building and obviously putting sustainable energy solutions in where we can is clearly something that we take the opportunity to do as maintenance and replacement of component parts is undertaken, so heating systems, etc. NLP, I'm not sure off the top of my head. But I don't know, Deb, whether you've got that knowledge. I've not got Nick to refer to in the back channel because he's on leave this week, unfortunately.
Good morning, Deborah Howells, Chief Officer for Infrastructure. In terms of NLP, the individual tenants are responsible for their own energy costs. So that wouldn't be a cost attributed to the authority unless that unit was vacant. So in terms of putting solar panels on those units, there wouldn't actually be an income benefit to the authority.
Thanks, that's very clear. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Sky. Thanks, Chair. On the Tour of Britain, so both leading into us getting involved, I guess, with the stage that ran through, obviously, Monmouthshire and Torvine. Those discussions with the Tour of Britain took place in advance, and I think the report that came through, which obviously secured the £25,000 contribution towards the Tour of Britain, that highlighted, I guess, the information that the Tour of Britain brings to the fore in terms of the case being made for economic impact. So they were able to refer back to the previous Tour of Britain, and I guess the levels of secondary spend and footfall that generated. We will, subsequent to the event, as I don't think I've not seen it yet, but it will be with us in due course. But the Tour of Britain will produce again that sort of impact report. I have asked, as the event was being organised, the level of granularity that we would see within that economic impact assessment. I'm not sure it will take us down into specific parts of Monmouthshire, but it will still be able to clearly confirm, I guess, the impact that is seen from the event. And I'm sure that'll be available to be shared once available.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So just picking up on the second question, Councillor Howells, in terms of car parking. I think just to be clear, this is more around our under recovery of penalty charges rather than paying display income. But we do have the Chief Officer on the call this morning, Craig O'Connor, who I think is happy to come in, Chair, if that's okay.
Yep, I see Craig on line, so that's very helpful. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. For anyone at home, Craig O'Connor, Chief Officer for Place and Community Wellbeing. Yeah, this is mainly due to the reduction in terms of penalty contravention notices, in terms of us being able to get there. We've had a few issues with regards to recruitment within the team, but I am pleased to announce that we are recruiting this week, so that will result in additional civil enforcement officers across the county to enable to achieve that income target. So there is certainly a plan to ensure that we are able to collect that income going forward and have that recruitment within the team. So that is an ongoing issue, but will shortly be resolved. So we're looking to see an increase in that from that point.
Craig, can I just ask what the total number of enforcement officers will be at the point that we complete this current recruitment?
Six.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate it. Councillor Howells, was there any thing you want to follow up on there?
Not at all. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
I think we, in terms of the Tour of Britain, we might call you our spokesman on that particular point. And thank you for that. And moving on very quickly to Councillor Bond. I see your hand.
Thank you very much, Chair. And excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold. Thank you for the inputs. Really interesting. A couple of questions supplementary to questions already been asked. Innovation House, I didn't see that on the list, so I understand that it might have been taken over by Training Department, but could you give us an update on that, please? And I guess it's within our assets now, so it wouldn't come as part of resources. And could we also encourage our tenants in Spitty Park or Newport Leisure Park to use solar panels, please? Could we encourage them rather than just say it's their responsibility, because we want to encourage anyone, don't we? And insofar as the resource, excuse me, the right size exercise that you did some time ago when we knew that we had to draw our budget in and we had restrictions and needs to do that, are we right size now? Are these vacancies in areas where there's going to be significant impact overload, and as I always mention, the stress and the mental health of and well-being of our staff? Could you make a comment on that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. And who wants to start with those questions?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to pass over to Matt Gatehouse, if it's okay, just on the training space aspect, and I guess to Councillor Bond's question, if she wants any level of further wider assurance around the building and its use. I'm happy to come in off the back of Matt.
Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Bond. So on the issue, so I'm not talking from a landlord services perspective, but having sort of people services and training within my brief. Just to confirm, training hasn't taken over the entirety of Innovation House. It still has elements of that building which are tenanted. However, we are running some training courses from the ground floor at present. It's space which is currently underused, and that means at present we'd previously been renting training space in third-party buildings at a cost to the authority. Because that space was vacant, there was an opportunity to use it as an interim solution, pending any longer term use or market demand for that, to reduce our operating costs in years. So yeah, we haven't taken over it. It's not a long-term solution, but it is something which is enabling us to keep costs down in the short term.
Thank you.
Chair, would you be happy? Well, I've got the microphone to come back on Councillor Bond's point in relation.
I was just going to suggest that very thing.
Yeah, Councillor Bond, it's a good question and a tricky question, because I think if I were to speak to a lot of my colleagues around the organisation, they would say they would benefit from having more staff or larger teams in certain areas. When you look at our head count as an organisation, our staffing levels in different departments, and compare them with similar organisations or industry standards, we are staffed on the low side. I know we've recently done some benchmarking in HR, for example, at the number of HR staff you would normally expect to have for an organisation of our size, and we are very much on the low or the thin side. That does create pressures. Equally, we have to be mindful of the budgets that's allocated to all of our departments by council as part of the annual exercise, and strive to live within those. What I would say is we are mindful of the pressures on staff. We have a very good wellbeing offer, both in terms of formal support available through our occupational health service and less formal arrangements, something called a go-to group of colleagues that offer to make themselves available to others around the organisation for informal support. We have things like counselling, we offer wellbeing training, support and guidance, and a sort of very active monitoring of this through HR colleagues to make sure that we are focused in on staff well-being, because that is a matter. We know that staff are one of our, from my opinion, you spare me to say this, Chief Officer of People, they are our most important asset. And if we don't look after our staff, we can't be there to provide a service to the public. So yeah, Councillor Bond, it is challenging. It will be a piece of work which is never completely continued, because our services continue to evolve and change. But it is something we are actively and continually monitoring at all times.
Thank you. Deborah, do you want to just pick up Councillor Bond's point about encouraging Newport Leisure to use solar panels even if we don't derive a direct benefit ourselves?
We could certainly look at working with tenants to support them in that endeavour. What I would say is that the majority of the tenants, in fact, I believe all of the tenants, are responsible for their own buildings. So they would be responsible in the first instance for the installation and the cost of the installation of the solar panels on that roof. If they were looking at that, they'd want to balance out, I would expect, the length of the lease against the capital commitment to installing it, and the savings that they would actually make in terms of utilising their own the renewable energy themselves. We did previously look at whether we could actually install solar panels on buildings and sell that energy to tenants. At the time we looked at it, in order to do that, you'd need to set yourselves up as a energy trading company. We did consider a lot of options at the time in doing that and piggybacking off other social interest companies, but we couldn't actually make it work financially for us. So I would suggest in the first instance, we actually look to support tenants that actually need support in terms of how they actually install that energy, those renewable technologies themselves.
It's often the case, I think, Deborah, and you'll be more familiar than I am with this, but that if a tenant invests in solar panels, they can trade that on to whoever takes over the lease. However, you'll be more familiar with that. So it's not always the case of they can only, make sense of the investment within the length of the lease itself if it can actually be traded onwards. So it may well still be, well worth having the conversation. Yeah.
And Cine Park's there for a long time, aren't they? Cineworld, I mean.
Yeah. Councillor Bond, did you want to follow up on any of those points?
So Innovation House would be part of our resources and should be recorded and listed, should it, because resource was one of the underspend areas. So I guess with including resource as assets and income resource and staff as a resource, then it's difficult to see whether it is because it's through vacancies or it's through other areas. Am I making sense?
Peter, did you want to?
Sorry, Chair. I just try and provide some clarity on that for you, Councillor Bond. It ends up with a few of these headings where they are so all-encompassing and they contain so many different things that you can have a job sometimes to decipher what's included and what isn't. Assets sit within that area, so any outperformance or underperformance from that will be covered within that area. I hope that's helpful.
Peter, did you want to pick up?
Thanks, Chair. Grateful to Councillor Callard coming in. I think if there was a specific point there in terms of Innovation House, in terms of where it sort of co-locates itself within the budgets, it is held corporately and it's managed within Landlord Services budget in the same way that Castlegate and NLP are, similar to industrial units, county farms, etc. So it's all under the broader portfolio. And again, if you take a read across to the separate report I referred to that comes into scrutiny, all of that investment in commercial property from which we obviously secure rentals and returns, that they all get reported under that one umbrella. The only point I made, just back to the conversation around renewables and solar, I will, Chair, just take that away and I'll discuss that through with Nick Keys, rather than it being taken, I guess, as a specific action to immediately being brought back to the committee. I'll perhaps provide a written response back into the committee.
Thanks, Peter. That'd be really helpful. Thanks very much for that. And it's interesting. Just before I pick up, Councillor Garrett, your question, we've had a question earlier from Councillor Strong on vacancies and Councillor Bond and resources, and this is always going to be a challenging issue for any local authority. But I wonder if Matthew, I could just see if I could just stretch that a little bit to understand it a bit better. So when we were going through, or when we are going through any reset or review of have we got the right number of people in the different areas, completely recognizing the pressures that you've alluded to very clearly on probably all our services, we happen to have from the report we'll be looking at next 241 employees in children's services and 421 in adult social care. So in the social care services, we employ 660 employees. And that's out of the total that you were just, I know you're going to confirm to us what the full-time equivalent number is, excluding school employees, but of the order of 3,000 level of magnitude, employ something like 22% of our total workforce, excluding schools, in social care, social care services being as important as they are for supporting the lives of people and the impact on their lives and their health. I just wonder, how do we make that assessment that we've got the right number in those areas as opposed to other areas where there are always going to be demands, always going to be pressures, that people's lives may not be directly affected in the same way. I just wonder how you would, if you're explaining that to a resident who said, you know, why don't we employ 1,000 people in an area where so many people's lives are affected, as opposed to employing in so many other areas? How would you explain that, Matthew?
First of all, I'd probably offer them a cup of tea, because it would end up being quite a long conversation with a resident, I think.
I'm not going to offer you a cup of tea. And I am
no hot drinks in the chamber, Chair,
unfortunately. Thank you. I appreciate it's a difficult question, but it's a reasonable one. I think a resident would want to know why do we employ the sorts of numbers we do in particular areas?
Yeah, and probably there's a number of things I'd add into that in terms of qualifying the questions, because what we talk about there are those staff who are directly employed by the local authority. A lot of the budgets that are allocated different parts of the organisation will be spent on things which are outsourced. So some of our social care will be provided by private sector providers, for example, in different parts of the organisation. So there is not always a straight read across between the number of staff directly employed and the significance of that area in terms of our policy priorities. The second thing I'd say in terms of response to that question is that all departments have to live within their means, and it's the council which sets the budget. And for the benefit of those watching at home, appreciate semantics, but council being the 46 members that sit in the chamber and have the legal responsibility for setting the budget. So if any one service here will have its budget, and through the process of budget setting at year end, if we are seeing growth in demand in certain areas, the chief officers and their colleagues will be responsible for putting in what we refer to as a budget pressure, explaining why the level of demand may be increased and how they would use additional budget. And some of that may be staffing. But equally, as the counterpoint to that, services at times will have to deliver savings, and at times those savings will be in the form of staff. And that's where the kind of detailed service change review comes in. So if we stick with the example of social services, for example, I know that Jane's colleagues, Jane Rogers, our Chief Officer for Social Care and Health, do extensive work within all of those services areas, determining what staff are needing within different geographical areas of what type. And that leads ultimately to the sort of the staffing levels which we employ. But I suppose similar to the issue with sort of Councillor Bond's question earlier, it is a continually evolving picture based on intelligence within service areas, but with the starting point being the budget, and alongside that being all of the modelling and intelligence that comes from service areas in terms of demand that leads to those annual budget adjustments, and an adjustment often within staffing levels within service areas falling out from that.
Thanks, Matt. You know, I think it's a pretty good effort without a cup of tea, and doing it in without any prior warning about the question. So thank you. And I guess it does. It is it's always going to be a challenge, but there clearly must be a measure of strategic decision making as opposed to iterative development of any service. It grows because the demand is there. And whereas the strategic would be more about saying, are we overall putting our resources where we need them most? And I think the point you make about the indirect use of resources and other employees is a very well made point. So it is something that, you know, trying to get a handle on that to explain to residents. Councillor Strong's point earlier was, you know, show a pie chart to explain where the resources go. The next thing people will want to know is, why do we spend it in that area and not in another area? And have we got that right? So I hope you understand why I'm asking that question. Thanks for the answer. And I see Councillor Garrett, thank you for your patience, and your question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Callard and the officers for all the hard work they do behind the scenes. I think it's important that council taxpayers understand that we've got a team here that's working hard to make sure that we get a balanced budget, and that cost savings are effectively brought in. So thanks to them. My first one's a quick one about the car parking. The issue with collecting money. I mean, I lived in the US, and if you get pulled over by the police there for not paying your parking tickets, it's do we need to be a bit more stricter about how we enforce these? For example, if we've got persistent parking offenders, are we going after them? Are we using perhaps an external debt collection agency if we've got people who are building up large debts with us, and so we can collect some of that money back? I'm just concerned that, as somebody who prides myself on trying to park sensibly and carefully so we don't cause inconvenience, are we making sure we're collecting money from those people, and what more could we do? Obviously, the new officers will be helpful, but is our recovery as good as it could be? As many of us councillors are, we're governors at schools, and we're aware of how the schools are working hard to balance their budgets. Teaching costs are mainly drawn by supply teaching. That's a big expense in schools. Having been a teacher myself, probably having gone into school many days when I was really sick and shouldn't have been in, but staff, do make every effort to get in, I'm sure. And what I'm also finding at the school I'm a governor at is that senior staff are having to take time out from their responsibilities to cover in lessons as well. So what are we doing maybe about trying to evaluate? I know there was a scheme for supply teaching, a Wales scheme, which hasn't really gone ahead. Is there something we can do in-house within Monmouthshire? For example, when you've got teachers that are maybe left the profession but want to come back on a part-time basis, are we using those effectively to cover, we specialist teachers, for example, coming in to cover lessons so that children's education doesn't suffer, and it's not worksheets every lesson when lessons being covered. What can we do to help our schools, to reduce those pressures on supply teaching is one thing. And also, are we sweating the assets? We've got 3 brand new comprehensive schools. Are those facilities being exploited for sports clubs and the facilities? We've got the brilliant theatre facilities. Are we making good use of those? Are the schools making good use of those to get money in to help reduce those deficits? And my third question is about the transport bill. I think we've had in the press recently, there's been quite a lot of concern about, for example, St Arvan's children getting to school, but we are not making as many savings as we hoped from the changes to the distance mileage, and I think it's important we let residents know that we are listening to people. We are if children can't find a safe route to get to school, we are covering those costs, and I think it's important for a public perception of Monmouthshire that we get that information out there, that no, we're not ruthless. We are listening to people, and yes, there are concerns and there are issues, but we are proactively trying to do that. And the fact we are overspending on that where we hope we'd save is an example of where the council is listening and is working with residents. I think that's important to get across. I'm sure we've all got the interests of Monmouthshire at heart, and make sure that residents know that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. So who is going to pick up the parking enforcement question? Did you want to give it a go there, John?
I think we've got Craig online, Chair.
Craig, sorry, yep.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Garrett, for the question. It's just build up on what I was just saying ultimately about the resources and issues we've had with staff sickness within the team, and I think the fact that we are now moving towards a fully resourced team will have a significant benefit. I think in council chambers we've talked a lot about highway safety and parking enforcement and the need for us to have a fully equipped team to address that. So the challenge with that is going to result in additional costs within that team because we are going to be paying salaries. So we need to certainly balance that. But priority needs to be that we are ensuring that we have got the right civil enforcement for our schools, for our town centres, and making sure that our highways are safe. So ultimately, I know that's what councillors want to see in our town centres, and that's what we are looking to deliver ultimately. The parking review has outlined a number of different solutions that can come forward in terms of tackling some of that income generation with regards to the penalty conservation notices. So we are looking at technology as well. How can technology help us within the authority? So I've got a meeting tomorrow actually with a mobile camera company to look at that aspect as well. So we're exploring all options, Councillor Garrett, ultimately, in terms of how we can ensure that civil enforcement is done correctly. We've also got a service level agreement with Rhondda Cynon Taff to help us with recovery. So there is that work in place. We do work with other authorities to deliver that on a shared service level. So that is in place. But I think the most important thing is that we get to a fully resourced team and we explore the technological solutions. I think that will then enable us to achieve that. So work is ongoing. The car parking review has been done now. We've shared that with members, and that will be adopted by council later on this year, and then that'll feed off then into other work streams regarding technology and that resource in the team. I said the recruitment is happening this week actually, so it's very hot off the press ultimately, but we should see a difference in the next quarter when we have that fully resourced team.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Craig. And on supply teacher costs and making best use of our schools, Nikki or Will, did you want to pick those up, please?
Yeah. Good morning, Chair. Will McLean, Strategic Director for Children, Learning Skills and the Economy. Yeah, so in terms of supply cover, we have seen a significant increase in the costs associated with supply post-pandemic. It's important to note that for many of our schools, they actually have insurance cover for that staff absence, and that does allow them to meet those costs. Internally, we've been looking at the potential ability of the local authority to potentially look at its own scheme to help schools manage that. At the moment, we're just kind of working through those mechanisms to understand what that could look like and whether it would be competitive with what people are able to insure against, or people using, as you said, Councillor Garrett, people they've known in the community who come back to school, or people who might have been away from the teaching profession. But it's one of the areas that we really focus on. And it's also one of the areas we do see run away sometimes with schools where they don't have insurance cover. So our advice to them is to always look to take that insurance. With regards to the use of facilities, in our secondary school sites, which you referred to explicitly there, our secondary school sites, all of them have shared facilities with our leisure centres as well. So it's really important that we find the right balance between our colleagues in leisure and the schools, and making sure that they're appropriately supervised, to make sure the right staff are there, to make sure they're safe and secure all the time that they're used. So in nearly all of the settings, we have a shared use agreement between the leisure centres and the schools to make sure that that management sits appropriately. There will be opportunities for schools to rent out the spaces that they have, and we'd look for them to do that. I don't think it's the panacea that some may understand it to be, because of some of those pieces around the shared use agreements.
Thank you, Will. And the fourth point you made, I think, Councillor Garrett, was more of a point than a question, but did you have a question behind it?
Yeah, it was really just that, we are, there's an overspend, and I just think maybe as a council we need to be a bit more defend ourselves more in the media. Make sure we explain to people, yes, we've had to make these changes because of the cost of school transport and the projected cost over a number of years, but we are being supportive of where there is not a safe route, for example. Those children are still getting transport. That's what I was trying to make clear. And there was just one follow-up to what Will said about the insurance on supply teaching. At the school I'm at, I know that there's certain thresholds that have to be met before the insurances pay out. So again, maybe it might be worth having a review of that, just to ensure that schools are able to get the insurance payments that because often it might be short-term cover, a day or 2 days, and it might not meet the threshold for the insurance. So just whether there might be some review of insurance down the line to see whether we're getting the best and that it is meeting the needs. Because if it is short-term rather than longer-term sick, some schools may not be getting the actual payments back to meet those costs, which might then be exacerbating the overspend. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. I think the first of those points is probably closer to a political point than it is a performance point. So, you've made the point, but it's something I think just for communication. If I may, as I see no other hands up, just I had a couple of questions. So, we've obviously been interested in the budget in social care because of its size as well as its importance. And I think residents are, they look at these reports on an annual basis, and they sometimes wonder actually how these numbers make sense. So can I just exemplify where some of that needs a little bit of explanation and ask for that? So 2 years ago in 2023, the total social care budget was 63.7 million. Let's call it 64 million. And this year it's 78 million, which is a 22% increase. And people paying their council taxes might well say, well, inflation over that period of time in the UK is 13%. So why has expenditure in those services increased by 22%? And they might well do so at the same time as saying in each of those years there has been a budget savings target, which I appreciate, we tend to get to about 85% of it, but between 3 and 5 million. And when you put all those together, it becomes, just for, I think, any reasonable person, rather difficult to begin to understand. So I wonder, John, can you just help to explain why the numbers appear to rise, seemingly inexorably in terms of expenditure, despite the reduction in costs and budget savings, and significantly higher than inflation? Could you help to explain that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think firstly, it's just important to recognise. I think you mentioned around that comparison year by year of service lines. Those directorate headings don't remain static. We will have services that transfer in and out of some of those lines. So I think that comparison, whilst it's good to have, I think we just need to be conscious of what may impact that. So for example, our housing and homelessness service will have transferred out of one directorate and into social care and health for this year. So that's quite a significant increase to that budget, probably in the space of around £2 to £3 million that's additional. So that does affect that comparison. But I think the wider point, Chair, is a good one. I think it's right to try and unpick and understand some of that increase that we're seeing. And certainly over the post-pandemic, we've seen a lot of our resources focus in on social care and education, probably at the detriment of some of those other services within the council that we provide. That does follow national policy sometimes. So you will have new policy initiatives that Welsh Government are looking to develop. They will provide funding for that. And we hope that it comes with 100% funding. Sometimes that's arguable. And again, that will be a reason for an increase in some of our base budget that is supported by further funding. And that will tend to follow the demand and the types of change that national government is trying to achieve. I think the one good example is probably in terms of children's services and the Eliminate agenda. So looking to eliminate profit from the provision of children's social care. That is something that Welsh Government have put a lot of money behind, and that will develop into further cost burden for the local authority, but it will come with funding from Welsh Government as well. So that will naturally provide growth in terms of our budget year on year that isn't due to inflation. It's due to new responsibilities, new initiatives being provided. But I think sitting behind all that, we also do see inflationary increases, but we are seeing and have seen, certainly post-pandemic, that level of demand for high need care, whether that's in social care or whether it's in schools in terms of our additional learning needs provision. So those two specific areas, account for the vast majority of that increase that we've seen over recent years. So I think when, Chair, you mentioned a resident's perspective on this, and just looking at those lines in isolation, I think it's very more nuanced than perhaps just solely looking at inflation, what's happening in the jobs market, how that transpires into some of those costs that we face. So, lots of different things playing into this. The interrelationship with health, for example, is one of those factors that influences our costs as well. So, hopefully that goes to explain, I guess, some of the reasons that we might not see just gradual inflationary increase in some of these cost areas, Chair.
Thanks, John. It is quite complicated, and I think it's partly for that reason that in order to be able to explain to council taxpayers where their money goes and to let them understand as easily as possible just how that looks over a period of 1, 2, 3 years or more, it's a challenge, but it's a good one for us to try and meet so that we can ensure that people don't just look at numbers and see them just as nothing other than numbers, but they can actually understand what lies behind it. I think it's a good challenge, and goes back to actually one of the earliest questions today, which is just not just about a pie chart, but what lies behind the numbers of expenditure. Just a couple of other points I made, just to note in the report, the rising demand for high cost care packages, which is substantially explained in the report, but something I'm sure we'll want to keep an eye on. We note also the family support grant being withdrawn by the Welsh Government, which is a significant impact. And also the school reserves deficit. I know, Nikki, you said it, we should be expecting it to rise, and that's a good forecast because it has risen by nearly 3 million to about 7 million, which now encompasses all the secondaries. And again, something we'll want to keep an eye on. But just if I may, a couple of final questions. So the NIC, the national insurance increase means that we are short of our budgeted expectation, and you referred to this, John, in your summary earlier, by about 800 of that order, £800,000 against the actual cost, and that's going to be met by use of the contingency fund of, I think, 850,000. So I just wonder how we deal with any further contingencies if we're eating up in a very significant part of it, is going to be very important for us to, I think, make good use of, have good understanding of. And coming back to, and you've touched on it, I've touched on it, the connection between social care and health and those high cost packages of care. It might be something that Jane, you'd want to pick up either now or in the next report, but I think residents will be very interested what that means, why they're rising and why they're high cost, and whether the report refers to a change or a review of the intervention points that Welsh Government appears to be undertaking, and whether that has any impact. But could I ask those two questions? The first on the contingency fund and the shortfall in national insurance, and then this potential interlink with health that is, it may be a root cause of the rise in, or the rapid rise as it's described, in high cost care packages. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take the first one. So I think absolutely right in terms of those numbers and that contingency budget being called upon in full. I think it's probably just right for us to highlight the further contribution that Welsh Government made to the funding for national insurance contributions, and the impact that public sector employers would need to face. So whilst a level of funding was provided by UK Government, Welsh Government chose to top that up because it was clear that there was going to be a deficit and an impact on public services from that shortfall in funding. So I think we're incredibly grateful that that was topped up to a certain extent. It has left us, circa 15 to 20% short in terms of overall funding, and understandably we've looked to draw upon that contingency. That does mean that going into our second financial update, we don't have that fallback position, and I think we probably just revert to the action that we've embedded over the past 2 to 3 financial years around that financial discipline and working with services to mitigate the level of overspends that we are seeing early on in the year. We're already looking at some of those measures, ones that will be familiar to the committee because they've been a feature of many of our recent financial reports. It is around maximising those grant opportunities and the income that we've opportunities that we have. So we've heard about Newport Leisure Park this morning and Castlegate, and really kind of trying to drive the income we generate from those assets. And there'll be a key focus on that as we go through the remainder of the year. We've also got the support that we currently have from capital receipts, which is still a feature within the budget during this year. And we will be looking to maximise the impact of that. We expect there to be some surplus within that we can then transfer further core costs into, and that'll give us an ability to mitigate some of the cost pressures that we're also seeing. So I think, Chair, it's you're right to highlight the risk around it, especially at the first monitoring period. But I think as we go into the remainder of the year, we work closely with services to develop all of those mitigation measures that I've outlined, which will hopefully help.
Thanks, John. Jane Rogers, did you want to pick up on the second question, either now or in the next report, whichever you prefer? But it's just the relationship, why we have a rise in high-cost care packages, and is there a relationship with our colleagues in the National Health Service?
Thank you, Chair. Jane Rogers, Strategic Director for Social Care, Safeguarding and Health. So I'll pick up that question now, if that's okay. So I think over recent years, we have seen more people needing higher levels of care packages to ensure that their needs are met. I think that is a steady increase in line with the demographics of Monmouthshire, with people becoming older, and the older people get, they tend to have more complexity of needs and different conditions. The number of care home placements for adults has seen a steady rise over recent years. And added to that is that when people now go into care homes, they tend to live longer within their care homes, which is a good thing, but it does have an impact on our budgetary position, because it contributes to that steady increase of care home placements that we provide. When people live longer in care homes, there's a threshold for when they start to where they stop having to pay for some of their own care. So if people are living longer in care homes, then increased costs come towards the local authority. And care at home as well, in order to keep people's needs met at home, people are needing higher levels of intervention packages, for example, double-handed calls or more frequent calls during the day. So the overall, although we're reducing the numbers of people in some places that need care, the actual care that's provided is increasingly more expensive and costly. And the same within children's, although we're seeing reductions or steadying out of the numbers of children in care, those children who then do come in have complex needs, which means more cost implication for ensuring that their needs are met. In terms of the question around the link with health, I mean, we do work in a very integrated way. As people come through hospital, their discharge, there's a real emphasis on making sure that people are discharged in that timely way from hospital, but often that means people coming out with quite high level care and support needs within the community. And the other element of that is I think the question underneath, if I was reading it correctly, was the question over continuing healthcare and continuing care, and where that boundary sits between social care and health, which has been around for many years. And I still feel that there is more that social care needs to do to really try and challenge that level of eligibility where that threshold sits. We do have ongoing conversations around individual cases with health, but I think, and as this is the case across the whole of Wales, I think there is that sense that incrementally social care are picking up more complexity than we have in the past, and that the thresholds around continuing healthcare have sort of nudged upwards. So I think that is a factor and something that is a part of a national debate at the moment, like you've mentioned.
Thank you, Jane. I'm sure it will sort of be something you'll want to pick up to a certain extent in the next report. It obviously does connect quite directly. But in the meantime, thank you for all the questions and all the answers on this report, and move this report, which is for us to make sure we've scrutinised and ensure that budget monitoring is in place. And I see no objections to that, so that report is good. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to move on to the next report, which is indeed the one we were just alluding to, which is the Chief Officer for Social Care to bring forward her Director's report. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, we'll move forward now, and thanks for the rearrangement of colleagues in the chamber, and we're going to move on to the item 5 on the agenda, which is the Chief Officer for Social Care report for us to scrutinise progress and strategic direction of the service area. And you'll find that report in a link on the agenda if you're looking at this now, or if you're looking at it online at a later stage. And if I could just ask those of you who may be speaking in the minutes ahead, if you'd just be kind enough to introduce yourself, largely so I don't mispronounce your name. I've got a funny accent, so it's very easy for me to mispronounce names. But if you could introduce yourself and your position, that would be really helpful. So I'm going to start by asking Jane Rogers to take us into this report, which is an extremely important one. It's one that we look forward to every year because it's very informative, an awful lot of information contained in it. And Jane, did you want to pick it up and perhaps pull out some of the really key points that you want to share with us before we go into questions?
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jane Rogers. I'm the Strategic Director for Social Care and Safeguarding and Health. I'm very pleased to present the Director's report for this year. It's my 4th report, and it covers both adults and children's services. The report format this year follows the Welsh Government guidance. So the sections within the report are set out by Welsh Government. This is the first time that I've had to write a report in such a way. The 4 main sections cover people, prevention, partnerships and wellbeing. I wanted to make a couple of points just around the context, and it's been really interesting this year, this being my 4th report, that what I've noticed this year is that it's the first time, I think, where the stability of the leadership within the Directorate has really, it sort of crystallised to me this year writing it, that the systemic nature of the changes that we've been trying to make within the Directorate have really started to bed in. And I think that's because of the stability, but also because we've really tried to make changes in a way that are deep-rooted and systemic. It's taken some while to really see them come forward in a more obvious way. I'd say particularly within adults, around the way that we're trying to change the way that we deliver domiciliary care, linked to establishing pathways into reablement, linked in turn to the way that we provide the right sort of advice and support at the front door, creating those pathways out into community-based wellbeing. And those things have taken a long time in design and implementation, but they're starting to take a hold, and we've got a real clear pathway now to the way forward over the next year and years ahead. These things are not always easy to achieve, and you know, during them we're having to both sort of manage the operational pressures and mitigate the risks of any changes that we're making, both on the workforce and on the people receiving services, as well as keeping that real eye on the future about where it is that we're trying to go, and putting in those different steps and stages that are required when you're really trying to do deep-rooted change. One of the reasons that these sorts of changes are required is that we're operating in a very choppy context. We have done over many years. Budgetary pressures, the demographic pressures, and pressures at times of not having sufficient workforce. So what we're aiming to do really is try to build long-term sustainability for services in a way that really takes account of the long-term need to ensure that our services are fit, they're good quality, and they're sustainable for our residents. Equally within children's services, you know, been working really hard to ensure that children have the support that they need to remain safely within their homes and communities. We've done that over years again by really building up a coordinated and coherent suite of family support services. This has meant in many ways that we've had to, well, we do hold people safely within the community, but that's really put demands on practice. Being able to work with some of our most vulnerable families to motivate, engage, bring about sustainable change within families who, many of whom have themselves very deep-rooted problems and societal issues that are impacting on them all the time, maintaining a real focus on the safety and well-being of the children at the heart of it. We've worked really hard to think about our placement needs in the future and to start developing our own in-house placements, because we strongly believe that by working with children in our own placements, we're able to provide them with integrated wraparound support, which really gets the best outcomes for them, as well as meaning that they can live closer to their homes and within the county of Monmouthshire. We've this year, right at the end of it, managed to secure an uplift in our fees and allowances for foster carers, which we think will really help us in our recruitment endeavours. And we, at the beginning of the year, agreed through Cabinet a 30% reduction on the council tax, and all these things really, I think, will support us in our endeavours around making getting good value for money for placements, but also getting those right outcomes for children, alongside of our developments in residential and supported accommodation provision as well. And I think one of the main things that I've tried to draw out in the reports is really that at the heart of all this is the workforce. You know, that social care is the workforce in many respects, whether it's our own directly employed workforce or whether it's through the workforce of the services that we commission. It's a challenging area to work in, social care. There's a lot of pressure. We carry a lot of risks. We carry a lot of trauma, almost vicariously, from the families and the individuals that we encounter day in and day out. So really trying to make sure that the right workforce offer is in place, that we enable people to feel confident and skilled in their work, remains, a very, very prime objective for us. And over this time, we've really supported particularly people in children's services in order to meet their statutory compliance data. We've put in some additional training. We focused our Keeping Children Safe training programme and provided additional mentorship through the safeguarding unit to really give people that sense of security and support for some of the very difficult decisions and situations they're encountering. And equally within adults, we know that, making big systemic, deep-rooted change within services does have its impact on the workforce. So we've really tried to listen, to put in place the relevant professional development and training that our colleagues deserve and require, and continue to really hear what they are telling us about the situations and the needs of our population and our residents. So there we are. It's the fourth report. It's always a joy writing them. They do contain a lot of information, and I always wonder where I can cut it back year on year. But once I get into the flow, it's difficult to know what to leave out. I would say though that it's very difficult to capture the breadth and scope of social care. Within the county. It's a huge service area dealing with many hundreds of people, both the residents we serve and the people in our workforce. So to try and capture it all really is a hopeless endeavour. But hopefully within the report you will find some really useful information about our plans, about our performance, and about just what we do day in, day out with our residents. Thank you very much.
Jane, thank you. And before we go straight into questions, it's just to really recognise the enormous amount of great work that is carried out by our colleagues in their hundreds across the county on a daily basis. And of course, they mainly don't sit in this building. They're mainly hard at work out and about. And just to have the opportunity to say thank you on behalf of colleagues in the committee for all the fantastic work that they do every day that they're out there. It's hugely valued and very much appreciated. And also to say to the officers, again, you are hugely valued and hugely appreciated, and that's not something I'm sure it always feels like, particularly when you're in front of a scrutiny committee that's looking at things like performance and reports and so on. But I know that we all very much value the work that you do and really appreciate it. And there's some notable points within the report, I think, that are worth just recognizing. I find it personally extremely helpful that you're including short form reports of individual cases, so case studies in different areas that just illustrate a service rather than describe it in numbers is very informative, and I think makes it much more accessible not only to councillors but very much more to residents. And it's something, I'll be certainly sharing it at community council level, encouraging it to be shared and to be read, because it refers back partly to what we were describing just a little while ago, which is we spend an awful lot of money on these services, and it's very important that the council taxpayers understand where it goes, or they'll wonder, and maybe some will not agree, some won't appreciate it. So I think the more we actually share it, the better. So thanks for the way that you've laid it out. I also value the charts where you show it in sort of graphic form, easy to read, very easy and to access, and also the performance aspects where, as a committee we've mentioned that the downside of self-evaluation is self-evident to anyone looking at self-evaluation reports, where you describe or grade ourselves, but when you actually just put raw information about performance, people can see, and they can see whether things are improving or not improving, or may have questions as to why it's 49% and not 99%. And so the raw numbers tell that story, and I think that's very helpful for residents to be able to access. So just to recognize that the report, I'm sure, has taken an awful lot of time by a lot of people involved in it, as well as yourself, Jane. And it's just to say that we did read it, we did find it very informative, and just let's hope we can make it available to more people around the county, so that we can help to raise the awareness of the excellent work that is carried out. So we'll move into questions, if I could ask committee colleagues to raise. And Councillor Strong, I see your hand up first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm sure we'd all like to echo the comments that the Chair made about the work of the staff and the nature of the report. It's such a huge report that it must seem that the questions are a bit random that crop up from it. So I do apologise for that. There's a figure about care leavers, 74% of them in employment, education or training, which means that 26% aren't. That seems to be a big figure, a large figure, particularly when they're not just 16 or 18-year-olds who just come out of school and are looking around to see where they're going to go next. I would assume we're tracking them through to the age of 25. Is that a matter that's giving you a great deal of concern, or is that something that seems to be, I hate to say par for the course, but is that normal, so to speak? Then there's a reference, we got 120 adults using direct payments. As I understand it, direct payments are seen as a positive thing, in that, for example, they give the client greater agency, greater control. But the trend doesn't seem to be moving upwards. It seems to be pretty stored, a little bit up one year, a little bit down the next year. Is there any reason why it's been difficult to promote that process? And then thirdly, on vacancies, again, it's good to hear about the greater stability that's coming about, but we do see improved recruitment, but still there's quite a churn in jobs. In the figures we're given, I mean, it's clear there's a lot of different job titles, but it's not very clear where the churn tends to be greatest. For example, is there a particularly big churn from those who have got professional qualifications and therefore might be more difficult to recruit because there aren't so many of those people people around, or is it at a different level of job titles? So 3 questions there, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. And Jen, did you want to try and pick them up? Starting with the needs. Yeah,
thank you very much, Councillor Strong. I'll start, but we'll bring in colleagues as I need to. 74% for care leavers who are in education and employment, and the other figure who are not. The numbers are actually smaller than you think. The data comes from a particular cohort of care leavers, not all care leavers up until they're 25, although we do track and know who all our care leavers are. So that figure is actually quite a small number of young people who aren't. Saying that, there are a number of reasons why some of our care leavers aren't in education or employment. Some of them are parents, some of them may be unwell. We know them all individually. So although we'd like it perhaps to be higher, there are very legitimate reasons why sometimes it's not. There are young people who are in that figure who would like to be in employment, and we try and support them as best we can during that, to get where they want to be, to get their own good outcomes. I'm just going to pause here and ask if Diane and Jess want to come in.
I'm Diane Corrister, I'm Head of Children's Services. Just in regards to that, we do, as Jane says, when we look at the number of children year on year who leave care, it's actually quite a small number. That tends to skew the percentages. But what we do is we know all of our care leavers, and they all have a PA, and they all have a placement, a progression plan, and education and employment and training is a key part of that. So obviously some young people leave care and they still have issues of trauma, and they can't manage any of those parts, but that doesn't mean the door's shut to them. Their advisors continue to work with them directly in order to be able to access opportunities as they grow and develop. So what might not be ready when they're not ready at 18, they may be ready at 21, 22. So we have a good pickup of young people then accessing those education, employment and training older in life, but because that we keep working with them.
Thank you. And then the second question regarding direct payments, yes, you're right. The figure is sort of doesn't seem to go up, does it? It sort of stays the same. I mean, we do encourage direct payments, but it really isn't for everybody. There's quite a lot of onus on employing and taking on the responsibility of managing the accounts that go along with the direct payments, and taking on the responsibility of employing a PA or hiring an agency worker to deliver that care. So some people, you can go through that process, but actually decide in the end it's not for them, and they would rather that the local authority took responsibility for the providing the care. For other people who embrace that, it's a really empowering thing for them to do, and it's often our young people, maybe with people with learning disabilities, who perhaps look towards that sort of direct payment route. But I will just pause to bring in Jenny.
Jenny Jenkins, Head of Adult Services. Yeah, the number at the end of the year, so these figures are just over the past 5 years, these are the figures at the end of that financial year. There is some ebb and flow throughout the year, people coming on and moving out of direct payments. Echo what Jane said, it's not for everyone. We do get inquiries, people explore the possibility of direct payments. We have a dedicated team of we've got two specialist direct payment workers, and we've got somebody who's recently been put in place to manage the service. So they go out and give specialist support and advice to people around what a direct payment entails. And then people decide whether or not it's an arrangement that they want to enter into. What I will say is that we are expecting a bit of an uptick in numbers during this financial year, specifically as a consequence of our recommissioning of domiciliary care services in the south. So we are dealing with an increased number of direct payments where people have exercised their right to maintain their existing care arrangements. So I am expecting those numbers to go up, but they haven't come through in the performance stats yet.
Thanks, Jenny.
And the final question was regarding where we get the turnover of staff. And you're absolutely right. There's so many different roles within social care. And actually, the biggest number of employees within social care are in our direct services, which is where we tend to see a little bit more churn. In terms of so that's people who are providing domiciliary care, reablement, and in our residential services. We also do get churn within the integrated teams or within children's services and family support, but those posts that require a professional qualification such as occupational therapy, physiotherapy, or social work, or even those higher sort of leadership roles can be really difficult to recruit to. So although we don't get a lot of churn, it can be very difficult to make sure that we get the right replacement. So it's really different, the different parts of where we employ people have different issues that impact them. So some areas see a quicker turnover, where it can also be very difficult to recruit, and others slower turnover again, but difficulties in making sure that we get the right people. It doesn't really, like you say, sort of detail that in the report. Something I'll be bearing in mind for next year.
Councillor Strong.
Yes. Thanks very much for those. I suppose what the three answers have in common is the board statistics are hiding much more complex situations, and that's partly why we have scrutiny and questions to deal, or we'd be given a house brick each time to go through. Yes, thanks very much on that. So it would seem to be that in each case, there's no undue cause for alarm or undue concern, but on the other hand, there's no complacency, and it's all being carefully monitored. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong, and it's well-made points and worth us just reminding ourselves and possibly anybody who may be watching that, whilst we're talking about statistics and numbers, we completely understand that every single one of those numbers is a young person in the children's field, or generally an older, fragile person, frail person, and they have sometimes such challenged lives, such complex issues that our staff are always trying to figure out the best way of supporting them, and we understand how complex that is. You raised I think a very fair question about the level of needs. I don't have access to any separate information, but while you were asking, I was just looking to see what is available online, and we're 26% of ours as care leavers are needs. It looks like the most recent information is actually pre-pandemic. They've not been recording it more recently like that, so it goes back to 2019. But for the rest of Wales in that year, 2019, it was 46% among care leavers, but the numbers can be really quite small. And so I'm just having a look again, just to more generally, we get reports on needs during the year, but it appears that would compare with 13% of all 19 to 24-year-olds in Wales in the last year. Just for relative comparison, and I'm just looking online to see what information says about that. So looking at hands up, I can see, first of all, Councillor Bond.
Sorry, Chair, I think there's a mistake. Councillor Garrett is before me. Thank you.
Councillor Garrett. It is indeed. Thank you. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jane, for the report. And I particularly find the charts on pages 6 and 7 really helpful. And I think it would be, if anyone was watching this, the press, for example, this is a great resource. It shows the kind of level of obviously the cost, but the complexity of what office staff have to deal with. And so I think it's really helpful. I think if more council taxpayers knew this, as Councillor Strong said earlier, about where their money goes, and they would appreciate that whilst council tax is obviously quite a big chunk of what people pay every month. The services it provides for those in need is crucial. And it's very important, I think, that we get that message across, and I think that those pages really do help. My question is related just to the direct payments. I've got 2 staff dedicated to that. I've got just a concern about how people are supported in managing this. You know, we do sadly see cases of coercive control and fraud in the news from time to time. And how are people helped with managing that to make sure that the payments they make are commensurate to the work that's been done on their behalf? Is there any monitoring of the payments? Do they have to deal with PAYE and NIC as well as that, or how is that taken care of? Just really about how are people supported in taking direct payments? I was a bit concerned when there was a lot of keenness from councillors that this should be encouraged, but I just had a slight nagging down at the back of my mind about how people were supported and just to make sure that they are protected and anyone who's vulnerable gets the right level of support and monitoring to make sure that there's no exploitation going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. And who's going to pick Jenny?
So when somebody gets a direct payment, we still hold the responsibility to review their care and support needs. So they have their assessment in the normal way, and it's just the way that they choose to purchase their care. There's 2 different ways. So they can either use the money to employ an agency directly, whereupon the local authority gives them a cash equivalent and they will pay the agency to deliver their care and support. They still fall under the responsibility of the social worker, who will review their care and support in the normal way. If somebody decides to employ a personal assistant, then they become the employer. So there are some responsibilities associated with that employer-employee relationship. And we do give advice and support around how to manage that relationship. And there are insurances that the local authority pays for to protect that relationship. But in terms of the actual financial side of things, we offer a managed bank account. So the local authority can pay the money into the bank account, and that bank account is then offered as a payroll service. So the payroll and all of the tax and all of the national insurance is actually undertaken by the managed banking provider. So the local authority takes every step it can to facilitate that relationship and make it as easy as possible, because it is daunting. Just the fact that you are responsible for managing that carer yourself is daunting, but on top of that, with all the financial responsibility, it can be even more daunting. So the local authority has put mechanisms in place to make it as easy as possible and to take the pressure away from that direct payment recipient, who really needs to be concerned about their care and support and not those associated financial responsibilities. So those are the options that we offer. So in addition to the social worker oversight, where their care and support is monitored, making sure their care and support needs are met, we do have a dedicated direct payment resource. So any issues around managing the direct payment itself are dealt with. So, our advisors can go out and speak to people and help them and advise them in terms of how they manage that direct payment. So I'm confident that there is a sufficient amount of support available for people if they choose to take up the option of a direct payment.
Great. Are you satisfied with the response on that?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Chair. That's really helpful. Really good. Really thanks for the response. That's great. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. And I'm looking for any other questions. And I see Councillor Howells.
Oh, I did have my hand up. It went. Sorry.
I think it was Councillor Bond before me. I see your hand's dropped.
Thank you.
I do beg your pardon. Something's gone wrong with the numbering system here, Jill. But
it's okay. No worries. No worries.
Ladies first, and I'm sure Councillor Howells won't mind.
Well, I was up there anyway. So thank you very much. Really, a considerable amount of work that is done by this a group of people. Fantastic work that's done, meeting the needs of our residents. Thank you so much to all of you. I particularly like the slides or the summaries on page 51, 52 as well. Really useful. But obviously there's much more detail than that because there's much more work being done. So my question is around, so you say on page 52, 85% of people are happy with support. And then there's also on 75, it says about adult questionnaires, and there's other questionnaires throughout reference. I wonder if you have thought about why the performance or the good feelings or positive feelings are less or appear to be less than COVID times or just before COVID 2021, 20/21. Wonder if there's any understanding from that. I understand. So that's one, please, thinking about the performance and the happiness or feedback from the people. That's the first one. The second one perhaps links into the domiciliary care changes, and on page 54, the learning from the change to domiciliary care in the south is being taken to the north, central and north. I wonder if you could share what learning that is and what you will do differently. That would be good. So I heard what Jenny just said and totally agree that there'll be an uptick in the direct payments and the confirmation that there is now enough sufficient support to help people, social worker support, because that was one of the biggest issues that we raised last year, or at least in the Caldecott area, of people being able to forward their thoughts for direct payments, but also for organising their sport in general. So I'm pleased to hear that now you're saying there is sufficient support. That's brilliant. Understanding that all these relate to the fact, I think Jane was alluding to before in the last section, that people is the length of lifetime is leveling out maybe, but the number of years where people are ill or are needing care has increased. So throughout, so understanding the pressures that are on you. So the first area is around questionnaires and performance and people's feedback about performance. The second one is around domiciliary care. And the last one is around on page 11, 112 and 113, the complaints that you've had, quite a significant number of complaints. I know that's perhaps par for the course, but wonder if there's any general learning from them and whether things have changed and what you've done. And there's two tiny things. There's a tiny thing about the looked after children. It says it's 48 children in care, but only 11, 27 and 9 are accounted for. So there's one person missing in your information on page 103. That's just a typo, I guess. Thank you. Want me to repeat those questions? Because
I was just going to say thank you, and not much gets past you in terms of any numbers that don't add up. So thank you for picking that up. But yes, who wants to pick up those questions? It's feedback, and in some ways the complaints link with that, but there's more than complaints and feedback, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Thank you, Chair. I'll do what I can to work my way through them and bring in colleagues where required. Yeah, the question of the adult social care surveys, it is very difficult to really work out what would drive an individual to sort of mark, where they are in terms of satisfaction and happiness, because we only get that output rather than detail. And it's always disappointing if you see a figure slightly do a downward turn, and equally joyful where we see it going up. It's social care is all about delivery of services to individual people, and really trying to work through at a more sort of wider level. Some of the themes that come out can be challenging. Sometimes with people, they may have had to wait slightly longer than they wanted to for a service. They may have had a change of worker halfway through a particular intervention. They may have had a service, but it didn't deliver what they expected. That that to be delivered. They may have had other issues impacting on them, which serve to sort of undermine their ability to access the service. It's really difficult on that individual level to sort of lift out judgments from it. I think the the answer to it is that we really try to make sure that our workforce is got the right training and skills, so that every encounter with an individual is a positive one, even if we can't achieve the outcomes that somebody is looking for, that we're really clear in our communication with them. They understand where they are in a particular process or framework. And equally from our provider services, which this survey will relate to too, really making sure that our quality assurance around the provision of the services that our partners provide is in place, that we listen and respond when things aren't going well for a particular person in a prompt way. Just to link into the issue around learning from complaints. I mean, this year I've put in a fair amount of detail in terms of the complaints that we've received, particularly at stage 2, which are the more complex complaints, or complaints that people have wanted to progress in that way. So we do get a lot of detail about the particular issues at play for those individual families, and that gives us a deeper an opportunity to really look in a deeper way at any themes. Communication is always really strong through that, which I've already covered, in terms of really making sure that even if it's a difficult message, communication is maintained within a family in a really clear way. Social care and encountering social care can be complex, particularly when it comes to financial issues or legal processes that families are involved with. There can be conflict between the local authority and what families want and expect. So being able to communicate through these issues with families in a really clear way is something that we try to, through supervision, training and support, and ensure our staff are able to do, but it does come through consistently within complaints. One area within adults that we're noticing increasingly is making sure that, particularly within our financial advice and where we signpost people to get financial advice, we've really got to that is an area that we do want to work on this year, so that we really are accurate in what the limits of our ability are to give advice, and making sure that people are signposted when we can't provide what is required. I think that's the two around the surveys and the learning from complaints. So turning to the question around learning from the commissioning care strategy that we moved forward with in the South. Well, at the end of this year, we were just tipping into that process. Obviously, there's no hard lines around this report, and we're all aware that then the process was enacted in the South. We haven't done our full-scale learning review with our partners Ardell, and involving our provider partners as well. So we've still got that to do. It was a little bit early after the transition to do that, but we have drawn through some interim lessons. Did you want to pick that up, Jenny, or did you want? Which I will turn to Jenny to pick up if she is happy to do that.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we've worked through with this process, with the commissioning process, is more about how we communicate with people. And as Jane said, I think we are still in the process of implementation in the South, and how we organise that implementation is something that we're reflecting on at the moment. But I would say that in terms of the implementation, things have settled down considerably, and those new care arrangements are being put into place and successfully. And at that point, we will then reflect on the whole process. And as we move into the different phases of implementation, we have to look at the different issues in each area, because the provider landscape is different. So we will modify our approach in accordance with that. But as Jane said, we're still working through the process, so we haven't had a chance to conduct our full review or to engage properly with ARDL, our procurement partners, so that we can pull all that information together and really develop our approach for the next phase of our implementation.
Thanks, Jenny. And of course, we're still, the strategy was a long-term strategy. So that learning will need to bring in how we develop a different partnership relationship with our providers so that it reduces that sort of level of brokerage and enables our re-ablement to work with people before passing on to our longer term providers. So, it's not what we want to review is not just about that procurement and implementation phase. Of course, we will need to review that in the first instance, but this is really about evaluating the long-term impact of the whole strategy. And I would want to reiterate that we will be drawing learning from the South, particularly about that upfront engagement with providers. We did that, of course, within the South, but there are ways that we would want to adapt that to really make sure that providers thoroughly and completely understood the process that they were entering into and what happens at the outcome of it. As Jenny said, the communication with residents absolutely critical. The tie-in between the procurement process and the operational teams, another really important aspect that, although we did, there's still learning to be gained, and to emphasise that the issues that we may have encountered in the South will have to be adjusted for the Central and the North because they are both different geographically and different in the provider landscape. But yeah, it's a really, really important question, Councillor Bond, so thank you for raising that. I think there was, and forgive me, I think there was one more question around a number and I didn't quite pick it up.
I'm sure Councillor Bond will remind you. Councillor Bond, I saw your hand up again anyway.
Yeah. I just wanted to come back on that. Really, really pleased to hear that you're saying that communication is the key, and perhaps we know any project, it can always be improved whatever you do. Communication is always an issue. So also I would like to suggest perhaps the support from social workers and making sure they're onboarded and ready and the capabilities there before you start an exercise like this or start the next exercise, because that's where didn't help people and they felt very vulnerable and uncomfortable. And so that would be brilliant. And also, sorry, if you could please, because this is something that we didn't hear about as councillors until I know we've changed the way we look at the forward planning and everything else, but if you could think about including the local councillors to be voices for those people, especially those people who only completely isolated and only see care workers, that at least we can be their voices to help this process go along. So please think about those county councillors as well to support them. So the tiny thing is on page 103, it says children looked after, 190, 70 of which it breaks down, I can't remember the detail, but it breaks down 48 children, but then it says 11, 27 and 9 were allocated in different categories, and that adds up to 47 is all, so there's one missing is all. Not a massive thing, just somewhere along the line one's been missing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. We will go back and check our numbers. I won't be able to find that missing child at this point, but we will check our numbers. Thank you.
Just for reassurance, I'm sure it's not a missing child, just an error in the calculations, but thanks for pointing that out. And thanks for the response as well. I'm going to move on to Councillor Howells.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane and staff there. It's good to hear that we're moving in the right direction on both children and adult services. As we mentioned earlier, we've already touched on the ageing county aspect, and I note that in the last between the last two censuses, our over 65s have grown 25% in size, with an influx, I guess, of people choosing to retire in Monmouthshire. and I guess this has a potential demand on our adult services. This increase will no doubt have an implication as it follows. We have a declining working age population. How concerned are you that we may not be able to meet our future service demand on this? And are you confident that the replacement local development plan makes sufficient provision for these potential increase in services demands by readdressing the demographic imbalance? Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor House. And Jane, did you want to try and tackle that one?
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Really important issues. So I think, I mean, there's no easy answers here. It's a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And, you know, we've been aware of the demographic changes and the impacts that they will potentially have on our services for some little while now. And I think, you know, part of what we've been doing is really trying to make sure that we're organised. We've organised our services in a way that really can withstand that growth in our older population, and maybe, you know, population who are living longer with levels of ill health. I mean, and that's partly the motivation behind us really making sure that we're working at the front door to do that linking with community wellbeing support at early stages, working with our partners to really address, you know, people's well-being issues early on, to try and do that reducing and delaying the amount when people need care and support and how much they might need. You know, critical to that, central to that, is that redesign around reablement. So in the past, not everybody would have gone through the opportunity that reablement can provide, but we've really redesigned our services within adults so that everybody really has that opportunity, no matter where they're entering the system. You know, we really want to make sure that we maximise those opportunities for supporting people in different ways, through helping them regain their confidence and their mobility, through occupational therapy interventions, through assistive tech. You know, there is more that we can do than, you know, perhaps we've been able to do in the past, to really make sure that we're building sustainable services through putting in really good preventative interventions right through a person's pathway. More recently, we've been linking with our partners, both within the council and within our health partners, to really look at that community-based wellbeing support, both with our health partners and internally within the council, to really see where we can tackle those who are most at risk of travelling towards more formal care and support. In terms of, you know, the underlying question around the demographics within the county, and is there ways that we can intervene on that through the RLDP? Again, you know, it's a great question. You're probably challenging me here at an area that I'm thinking. I mean, interesting that housing has come into the directorate, you know, I think, which is a really great opportunity to really think at that strategic level around, you know, housing need. And RLDP level, I think the ambition is there, you know, to attract families in, you know, to provide housing that might be more attractive to sort of younger demographics. But it's probably slightly outside of my, you know, it's a really great question. And I know that that's come up in terms of, you know, are we building the right housing stock to ensure that we've got not only younger people, but actually workforce coming through, you know, that our older population at some point in their journeys might well be depending on the right affordable housing, so that people who are in sort of direct care work, which can be in a sort of lower income bracket, you know, can come and live and work in the county to support our, you know, us as we get older. It's all of us, isn't it? It's not other people. It's all of us. Yeah, yeah. So I hope that, yeah.
You know, because I could expand a little bit more on that, because I think you're absolutely right, Jane. Is that trying to tackle that demographic challenge that we face in this county is not a short-term fix, you know, and all of these things, whether it's the work within the social care directorate in terms of
responding to the challenges, whether it's the wider whole authority approach to prevention and well-being that we're trying to work out and roll out with other partners within the county. That's all going to do its stuff. And in terms of the changing, trying to adjust the demographics is a key part of the RLDP. And I think you're right, as Jane has said, it is about actually trying to shift the profile. So we have the proportion of older people in the population is slightly reduced. It is about making sure that we've got accommodation for people that will actually be doing a lot of the care work, because a lot of our care workers are commuting into the county from outside, from lower cost areas. So we do need to address that, but it is also addressing that challenge that we're all aware of, is that, as our children leave school, leave higher education, they can't afford to stay in the county, so they're moving out, which means that there's an increasing proportion of people, as they're getting older, no longer have children and extended family around them to provide that family support. So the more opportunity we've got to create affordable housing in the county so that people can stay here and stay part of the communities that they've grown up in, and then in time, become part of that care network for their older relatives. I think it's really important, and it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term thing. We're having a very long-term vision when it comes to this. But if we buck that vision, if we just bury our heads in the sand, then we're just only going to make the situation worse. So that's why we're bringing forward this plan, and then hopefully that will get approved and taken forward to the next stage next month. Thank you.
Jane, back to the report. I feel we're slightly moving into the LDP itself, but is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, or anything, Councillor Howes, that you wanted to add to your question?
No, thanks. It's just good to hear that these things are being considered and given a lot of serious thought. Really, they do have very, very serious implications for us here probably, because we are the next generation of 80-year-olds sort of thing that are going to be reliant on the services that.
Who's he looking at in particular? That's what he's looking around the room. He's casting eyes on.
It's lovely to see the technology that's going there. I was down at the launch of the Overmono assistive tech room there, and it's great to see what is there to enable people to stay at home. As Councillor Chandler said, families are being further away, living further away because of affordability, and we're unable to look after our sort of our children may not be able to be the network that's required to keep, and that just puts a further burden on us as a council. Thank you for your replies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howes, and I think that's another interesting quote for the day. The next generation of 80-year-olds. We've had a couple of good quotes today so far. Councillor Strong, I see your hand's up again. Is that a legacy hand or just?
No, I just say very, very quickly, without risking getting involved in a discussion about the RDLP. I did notice that the Anara Bevan Health Board had actually made a comment about precisely that at that point in the responses, and that we're looking at on Thursday, and it was very much in relation to workforce, presumably not so much for social care, but for those that actually work actually within the NHS as well, who have similar problems.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Yeah, and I think it's long been accepted, as well as for workforce reasons, that housing is an absolutely central part of good health, and so it's very important that we do discuss that. Thanks for those questions. Just a couple of last ones I have. The first one is a sort of numbers alignment again, Jane, and if I could just give you a couple of reference points for it. The infographics add up to employees working in adult social care and children's social care at 660. But on page 16, the social care workforce is described as 820. So it'd be good if you could possibly just have a look at those, and there's a rationale for it, but it's not presented. So that's page 16, 820. And the infographics, if you just take the numbers shown there, they add up to 660. Just to recognise the impact of the workforce grants of £3 million and how important they are. And in the uncertain times that we live in, looking ahead, with so much talk about cutting costs at national level, it does make you, it certainly makes me concerned about grants being, as it were, an easy thing to cut across the board, and something we'll need to keep an eye on. And more recently, we've heard information coming from the UK-wide government, and I think it covered England and Wales, which represented the cost for last year of the average looked after child, the average child in care at £300,000, and that's been a steadily rising number over the course of the last 20 years, but that's the number that came through in reports last week. If you do the impossible thing that we must not do, but it's too tempting because you've given us the numbers and therefore it's tempting to divide one into the other. But if you divide in the infographics on children's services, the amount spent on children's services by the number of children in care, you come to a number which is going to be entirely wrong for all the reasons, closer to about £100,000. Of course, they're not all going to be in the same category, but I wonder if you could just slightly unpack that, but to try and give us an understanding of what our average costs are for our children who are in care. Yeah, and it's also really worth, I think, recognizing the very significant improvements in different areas that we can see in the within the services. So on page 34, the number of contacts of children received by statutory social services, if we look to the pre-COVID year or the year that we entered COVID, and compare it to where we are now, it's been on a very steady increase, or a very sharp increase during COVID. And whilst it's come down a bit from last year, it's still somewhere around 30% higher than it was pre-COVID. So in other words, our services are dealing with around about 30% more contacts in the year, close to 6,000. And in dealing with those contacts, if you go further down the metrics that are shown there, back in that pre-COVID year, we were dealing with, you were dealing with those contacts received within one working day at a level of 70%. And you've driven that up over the last few years, and it's now at 100%. So it's, first of all, to recognize that and thank you for it, and for the amount of really important work that sits behind it. There is also very significant improvement in adults social care when we look at the number of people waiting for domiciliary care, moving in 2024 from 33. Okay, so 33 individuals waiting for domiciliary care, and it's now at the level it's being recorded at 13. The number of people last year waiting for longer than 30 days was 19, it's now 6. And the number of hours of domiciliary care not filled was 306, it's now 132. So just to again say, in adult social care, we really appreciate those improvements. So it's not just numbers, it's an awful lot of individual people, and we're never where we want to be, but there are some very marked improvements. So thank you. That's really helpful to see. Yeah, so those were the main points I just wanted to flag up, and to thank you all for the responses. And we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which first of all, sorry, I'll move that report and see no concerns raised. So that report is moved and good, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the safeguarding annual report. In doing so, I'm just checking, would everyone like a 5-minute break, or would you like us to continue? I see at least one nod, so I'm going to call it a 5-minute break, especially I see it also online. Thank you for that. And could I also just pass on the apologies of Councillor Martin Newell. He's had to just leave right now for a funeral that he advised me about, which is in his local area of local policeman, which is very sad. So thank you for advising me of that, Councillor Newell, and a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to the safeguarding report, which is item 6 on the agenda, to scrutinise the performance of safeguarding arrangements. And I don't know who wishes to take that one first. Jen?
Thank you very much, Chair. So it always works out in terms of the timing that we deliver the Director's annual report together with the annual safeguarding report. And I think they actually do complement each other really well, but it does mean that everybody has to read 2 very long reports. So apologies for that. The safeguarding report, again, it's an annual process that we go through. And it really aims to help councillors and other members of the local authority and residents gain more information about the steps that the local authority takes to ensure that effective safeguarding arrangements are in place across the county to ensure that the people who need to be are safeguarded, which includes vulnerable adults, adults who are at risk, and children by virtue of their age who are vulnerable. With safeguarding, and never more so than in today's day and age, really, you cannot be complacent. It's a changing landscape that we work within safeguarding. We need to try and get ahead of the game in terms of understanding the risks and issues that affect our population, particularly those who are more vulnerable. Things move on, society changes. We're experiencing, criminal and sexual exploitation of children, young people and vulnerable adults that we may not have been aware of sort of 10, 15 years ago. COVID came along and had its impact on many people's lives, and some of those issues are still sort of creating ripple effects around children's behaviours, children's emotional well-being, all of which requires a safeguarding approach. So, we do in these reports really try to present that full picture around the arrangements that are in place, and within that, place an emphasis on some of the way that we're having to respond to safeguarding issues that we encounter, as well as those, the sort of bread and butter of making sure that we're working within statutory frameworks correctly. In its usual way, the safeguarding report covers 5 domains, which over many years now we've established as essential to ensuring effective safeguarding arrangements. That's good governance, safe workforce, working preventatively, providing robust protection, and ensuring that services that are delivered on behalf of the council are as safe as they can be. We use the council scoring framework, and for good governance, we've marked ourselves as good with major strengths, which has been stable over many years. This really relies on our quality assurance processes, our safeguarding assessment evaluation frameworks that we ask all services and directorates to complete, the fact that we've got a really effective whole authority safeguarding group, and that we present this annual report to Scrutiny and to full council really leads us to score ourselves as having major strengths in the oversight and governance that the council brings to bear on safeguarding. For safe workforce, we've scored ourselves at 4, which has been you remained at 4 over a number of years now. And part of this is around the ongoing journey that we've had to make sure that our training is both linked to a digital learning management platform, so that we can really get accuracy of numbers and know who needs what training and how many people have done it. But also, on top of that, the transition between our original training framework, which was described in levels, to our training under the new national training standards, which is described through groups, people needing a particular type of training. So we are still working through that. We're making good progress, and having linked in with other local authority areas, we are moving forward in a robust fashion. but we still feel that we are four, so major strengths, but with rooms for improvement until we really get that driven down and bolted in to all our systems and processes. We feel we can't move forward with towards the 5. For prevention, we have gone up recently, so we were sort of 4 and 5 last year. We feel that we're in a place where we feel we have got major strengths, and I would really reiterate that working preventatively across the council and with partners to get this upstream sense of being proactive around emerging issues. And we've talked about harmful sexualized behaviour within schools this year, which we haven't had to address previously, but it is something that we are seeing emerging. We do regularly update on our approach to criminal and sexual exploitation, but I think some developments this year about really revitalising that MEG group, which deals with trafficking as well. So you know, the prevent, the working with safeguarding more generally in schools, you know, all these are examples of how we really do try to get in early and work with a partnership approach to prevent safeguarding issues from escalating. Our robust protection, we have again maintained our 5. I think this year has been reflected in the director's report as well. We've really worked on statutory compliance, particularly in children's services. We've really drilled down on areas where we need to just to get that uptick in how we maintained our compliance with the statutory framework, which is so important in children's services. So particularly core groups, stat visits, things like that. You know, we do lots of other things, but those just showing that statutory compliance is so important, and that's really shown a good improvement this year. For safe services, it's quite a challenging area for this. You know, this is about making sure that the services that are provided on the behalf of the council are safe. So they are sometimes not quite as in our direct control as, you know, our own services and our own workforce. Nevertheless, we make sure that we've got really good quality assurance process in place, particularly within social care commissioning. And in terms of licensing, where we can influence and we have got regulatory powers, we do make sure that we are upfront in terms of the awarding of licenses, which covers many, you know, vulnerable areas, you know, particularly taxis, you know, alcohol licenses, hospitality, and gambling, and so forth. And in terms of our passenger transport, particularly our home to school contracts, obviously, you know, contracted out, but safeguarding being so critical in that area of the council's business. So overall, we're confident still that you know, our safeguarding arrangements across the authority are in a good place. We work effectively together. We have strong leadership. We're aware of what the issues are. We have plans to address emerging issues, and I think more importantly, I think over the years, and I don't think we're in a different place now. Over the years, we've really driven hard at safeguarding being absolutely part of everybody's responsibility within the council. That's workforce, councillors alike. Okay.
Thank you, Jane. And yeah, I certainly recognise that. That's been something been very prominent in the work. So good to see. So I'm opening the report for questions, and colleagues, if you have any, I see Councillor Strong with your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, clearly crucially important stuff here. You mentioned the emergence, the word you used, the emergence of harmful sexual behaviour in schools, something we've not really looked at in the past. I suspect this is a big issue that might require a whole meeting or part of a bigger agenda, either on this committee or people or wherever it best fits. But I wonder if you just get a little bit of indication. Is this an actual increase, or do you think it's a greater awareness on our part and the part of schools of the need to take this more seriously than it has been? I mean, my words aren't quite right there, but you know what I mean. Are we looking at this more closely than we did in the past, and therefore it's a rise in reporting rather than a rise in actual incidents, or is there an actual rise? If there is a rise, do you think it's linked to the whole sort of Andrew Tate influencer scene, or is it some sort of hangover from COVID? I'm not quite sure how, but have we got any indications? And Chair, do you think it might be worth? I hesitate to add anything to scrutiny committee agendas because I know they're overloaded at the moment, but at some stage this would seem to be an issue that does need careful examination.
Just before Jane, you want to pick up on that, but on the question of the forward plan, Councillor Strong, I suggest that we, when we speak to Will McLean about his director's report when it is due, that we actually ask for an update on that aspect within that report, and not just assume it may or may not be there. So I think we can definitely follow up in that way without adding yet another item to a crowded set of agendas.
Yeah, that sounds sensible. Yeah, thank you.
But Jane, did you want to, and colleagues, did you want to pick up? Yeah, thank you, Dan.
I think in reality, none of us really understand what happened in COVID for the generation that came through COVID. I think there is an uplift. I think a lot of this is, and when we've explored this within safeguarding, in children's safeguarding, and we work very closely with education and the youth offending service, we have seen a huge increase in this area. I think you're right. A lot of it is about complexity of care and outcomes post-COVID. But I think there is a lot to be said about people's understanding of what is appropriate. Children now live in a very different world, and you've talked a little bit about that, which is about online influence and what children have access to now. And I think that's part of the difficulty, is that we've seen this rise, but there's been a huge amount of training. I think one of the things we are fortunate in Monmouthshire to have is our MEG group, our Monmouthshire Exploitation Group, because that allows us to do a great deal of horizon scanning, so we can respond to. So we've done a lot of training in education. Education have done a lot of training, but there's been a lot of training and teasing out from the exploitation agenda that we're aware of, to really look at some of the behaviours that are causing us concern, and to be actually detailing it now and reporting on it. And somehow I think it went a little bit underneath the curve before. So we are becoming more aware of it, but we are aware that it is actually a issue, and obviously it plays out mostly in schools because that's where most of the children are, and they are dealing with the day-to-day. Did you want to?
Sorry, Jess Garisbrick, Service Manager for Safeguarding. And I just picking up on your point, Diane, about the increased awareness. I think a lot of these cases were being held under an exploitation arena. And I think with that increased awareness and understanding, we've identified it's a risk in its own right. And we are being able to record that now around those harmful sexualised behaviours, the complexities that come with that. So I think we have recognised that it needs to stand alone, and we need to look and explore that further.
That's so strong.
Yeah, just quick. Thanks for that. I mean, it's encouraging to know that the additional measures that are being taken. And it would be very useful to know exactly what is being done within the schools to counter these problems. How far, for example, are we bringing in experts in these issues to to talk to the pupils? I mean, I know from my own experience, many years as a teacher, we did social education, but we were not experts in many of the things we were talking about. Far from it. In cases, there are children who knew more than we did about things we were trying to tell them about. So we do need a proper program with the right people delivering this, I think.
If I just come back there is education of work with safeguarding to develop a really robust education, understanding and recognition process. They work very closely with the Youth Offending Service, and there's a group that works together with Safeguarding Children's Services, Education and Youth Offending Service. So we really are pulling in that expertise to tackle something which is a rising trend that we've noticed.
And Councillor Strong, it's a really interesting point you make about teachers because you'll know better than I can say from your career experience, teachers very much are the front line, if not the front line, a prominent front line for safeguarding. And of course, our schools will have good safeguarding development in place, but it does seem like it's an ever increasing demand on teachers, which they will need the support. And it really is something that I'm sure Jane and Dan and Jessica and Jenny, you'll be talking to our colleagues in our school support to say, actually, we can't be doing today what we were doing 5-10 years ago, because the demand and the complexity of demand in every classroom that a teacher goes into, they are faced with notes about so many children that they need to take stock of. And many of those children are very vulnerable in different ways. So it will be very interesting how you're able to work across the services to support what is effectively that incredibly important front line. Councillor Strong, was there anything else that you had there? Councillor Bond, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the report, another really good report again. My first question is around, page 137, which is practitioner concerns, children's allegations / concern, and then adults. And really the other category and the inappropriate conduct category, which might link into what you've just all been talking about, because they are significant categories. So it's over almost about 50%, or no, 60-70% if you look at the other and inappropriate conduct. Could someone explain what they mean and why they're separate from physical assault, physical chastisement, sexual abuse or assault, all those things, if that's at all possible, please? That's one, please. Two is page 154, really good work, great spot and great work on the way one-page profiles being shared with the staff in PTU for CYP transport. Really good. Sorry, children and young people, and public transport units. Sorry, I'm talking in acronyms. So that's a real good result and good spot. And I wonder, you say that it's reduced to 2 cases, but I wonder what it reduced from. So if you could share that, please, brilliant. And the other one was around 155 onwards. Great to see so many greens on your action plan that you've succeeded in completing in this 24-25, sorry. Just wonder, or the ambers in the RAG rating, do they relate to actions on somewhere that we perhaps can't see in, obviously, department actions or whatever? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Who wants to pick these up?
As Councillor Bond, with regards to the other category for the practitioner concerns, it relates to risks or concerns within a practitioner's home personal life. So, for example, if there has been a referral with regards to substance misuse, which isn't within their place of work, it's within their personal life. So it's those scenarios.
And the inappropriate conduct, sorry.
Sorry, the contact, yeah.
The inappropriate conduct was the other one. It was a significant number. Thank you.
So that relates to within their practice. It's not necessarily, it's ones that sit without a clear category. So they were never they're never the same scenario. So it sits under an inappropriate conduct when it falls just above a disciplinary issue, but it wouldn't fit into a category of physical chastisement, harm of a child. It could be, trying to think of a scenario, verbal abuse of a child within a school setting, shouting at a child, those types of scenarios.
So it's behaviours that don't fall into the other categories. So it's behaviours as professionals we wouldn't expect to see aimed at a child primarily.
Would it be useful to separate those out to see whether there's any increases? Because it's such a significant percentage of the numbers. Thank you.
these categories are nationally identified, but that's something that we can look at in more in depth going forward. Absolutely.
Councillor Bond, you look content with that? Yep. Good, thank you. And I don't see other hands up, so just a couple of questions.
Sorry,
Jim,
there's
were
more
you
questions. Sorry, there was
Oh,
more
sorry, I beg your
questions.
pardon. Jane,
That
were
was
you
just the
looking to come
first
in?
question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay. Jane, were you looking to just on?
No, I was actually looking for, just if you wouldn't mind the second question being repeated.
That's okay,
Councillor
no
Bond.
worries. Sorry. So on page 154, it was about the one-page profiles, and I was commending the spot of the issue and someone putting some remedial action into place or mitigation action, so that now that they've been shared with the people who are working on the transport, and it's been a good result. It's reduced to only 2 cases that been come forward. I wonder how many cases there were before, and really commend you for that. Just how many cases, and then about the action list, please.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. I just heard the reference, so my apologies for not following through on that. Jane.
Thank you. Right, we've located where we are in the report, so thank you very much, Councillor Bond. And actually, I have to apologise. We know, yes, we can't answer that question, so we will come back to you on a number of cases that went under PCM from this service area last year. We'll have to come back to you on that. We haven't got the number.
Sorry, can I speak, Chair? Sorry.
Yes, please.
I don't think it's necessary if you made an improvement. I just wondered if it was significant change, but I was just commending you on the change and the action. Thank you.
Yep. If I were you, Jane, I'd take that as a compliment. Thank you, Councillor Bond. And was there anything else, Councillor Bond, that you wanted to follow up on?
Just the action list, please, where the actions go, where the rags, the amber rags are, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Yes, so I can see, there's a number of actions. So if I can if I try and whisk through them very quickly, you'll see in part of the pack that there's the 25-26 action plan as well. So some of them do cross-reference. So the safes, the first one, that's amber because it was, to be fair, it was completed this cycle, but it's moved over because now we're starting the next cycle. So that will be that's transferred into the next action plan. The link between the Thinky and the national training standards, that was covered in the main body of the report. It's still a work in progress. So it is the elements of that are picked up in the 25-26 action plan. The
Sorry, Chair, I don't think we've got the 25-26 action plan, have we? Or I've missed it.
Separate
Sorry.
Document. Apologies, Councillor Bond.
Oh, I missed that. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry.
It's a separate link in the agenda, Councillor
Oh,
Bond.
I beg your pardon. Okay, you've answered that question then. Don't worry about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, that was an easy one then. Actually, that works out. Thank you. But it's actually quite informative. The other link. So just a couple of points, if I may, before we finish on this report. Again, just commending everyone involved for the work that is carried out in safeguarding, and we associate it ourselves with it, and that's in all its forms, whether it's challenging or whether it's working well, but it's incredibly important. Thank you. Just in regard to the report itself, I think we need to make sure we call it a self-evaluation report if that's what it is. I think it's headlined as an evaluation report, and it's more than semantics, because I think residents would probably take the view, if I could guess at it, that an external evaluation would talk about, things that are working well, things that are working less well, what you might call the good and the bad and the ugly. And it's hard to imagine an external evaluation not giving reference to all those things. It's very normal for self-evaluation to talk more about the good and to list the things that are being done. And I think that's what this report has a lot of. It's quite hard to find what we might put in the category of the bad or the ugly, things that are not going well and things that we're simply performing below an acceptable level. And it always does ask or beg the question, I think, of the value of self-evaluation. If what we are actually presenting is something that residents might see as less of an evaluation than they would be expecting. And I just raise that as a question, how we might be able to strengthen that, and perhaps some of the answer to that is in getting more feedback from service users fed into this. The second part is really a question around, you've raised in the report some really important information about referencing the rise in permanent exclusions in our schools, and of course that's worrying in a number of points, but you establish what appears to be a connection, if not a correlation, with the rise in the use of knives within our school, or at least, if not the use of them, the wearing of them or the carrying of them, leading to permanent exclusions. And I wonder if you could just explain that one a little bit. Is that something that I'm misreading, or is that something that is a concern that underlies the permanent or the long exclusions? And those 2 points, if I may. Thank you.
In regards to the feedback and the issues of self-evaluation, what I would say, and perhaps needs to be brought out more robustly in the report, is how we judge ourselves across a regional and national framework. So whilst it is a self-evaluation, our links with both national and regional safeguarding boards give us some level of reassurance of the things that we're looking at and how we compare. In regards to issues of knife crime, also I would say that we have the CIW report within children's safeguarding, which we have been measuring ourselves against, which highlighted some of the issues about national compliance and how well we've done against that, and informed our action plans. So I understand what you're saying, and there's some good points there that we can take on board. But I would just say perhaps we need to make it clear about where we are holding ourselves against regional partners, regional authorities and national authorities, and that may be helpful for people to understand how we rate ourselves. In regards to knife crime is a national problem, as well as a local problem within our schools.
So Dan, it's less about knife crime as such, and more about whether there is a link with permanent exclusions in our schools.
There is a link, but I don't think it's the only link. I think with permanent exclusions, and I know it's something the education teams have been working very hard on, particularly with regards to looked after children. But in terms of what we would need to probably answer your question is probably we would need to come back to you and check in with our education colleagues as to what is leading and whether there is a link between knife carrying and permanent exclusions.
Yes, thank you. I think there's also in Jane, in your report that we looked at earlier, there's a reference to it, but it's more than a passing interest. You know, if we have got, it may be that I've missed this in previous years, but I don't recall seeing that correlation or that link, if it's not a correlation, before. Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got the data in front of me, but because I'm a member of the management board for the Youth Offending Service, and we get a lot of detail in terms of young people that come through the Youth Offending Service. And from my recollection, although the carrying of knives is a feature in some of the cases, we get a fairly detailed breakdown of what types of offences and behaviour cause that. I don't recall it being a significant factor compared with assaults against the person, and as you've already said about damaging sexual behaviour. inappropriate sexual behaviour, things like that. So although it's there, it's not come out to me as a significant factor in this area at the moment. But we can certainly go back to the Youth Offending Service data as well as the safeguarding data to validate that, and with the Education Service. It's a question that's well worth asking, but as I said, I don't think it's, out of all the factors that I've seen, I don't think it's one of the ones that's causing me to sit up and take notice.
Well, that would be reassuring, and I think it's only because I'm actually looking for where I read it in the report that it's that I've picked that out. But it would be something I think to pick up with our school support team to see whether or not that is a genuine link. I think I may be mistaken, but there may be other residents around the county who look at this and think that the carrying of knives is a greater problem in our towns, in our bigger cities, our larger cities around the UK, than it is in a more rural county like Monmouthshire. And if that has changed, I think it's significant. So it's the reason for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Councillor, I can see in the report where that's picked up, and why you're questioning is that, was that a deliberate link? So we will try and find a little bit more consolidated information around that so that we can understand what the permanent exclusions were. There will be some detail behind that, so we can check that out.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's going to be important that we have an accurate picture of what's happening there, if indeed something is. So thank you very much for the responses, for the questions from colleagues, and I move the report on safeguarding, its annual report. I see no issues raised, so that is done and moved, and we move on in our agenda to the Council and Cabinet work plan, and thank colleagues who have attended the committee for the last two reports. Thank you very much for doing so, and thanks for all the full responses, but most of all for all the hard work. Thank you. We try and while we're doing that, we'll crack on as we're working on the tail end of the agenda. The Council and Cabinet work plan is there for everyone to see. We've got a busy time ahead. And Robert, did you want to add any points to it? Okay. So we're now moving on to the item 8, the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Work Programme. And again, for all to see, Robert, did you want to add anything? Sorry, Councillor Bond.
Can I get that previous, please, for the work plan? I just wanted to say thank you very much for putting the purpose in there and the additional column. Really useful. Some inputs are more useful than others, and not fully extensive. So some don't actually get to the point, and some just state what the title says, but it's getting there. Thank you very much. The other thing is there any way of identifying, if you remember, the other part was which ones have been completed, because you can't really tell from the dates whether they've been completed or not. Could they be greyed out, the ones that have been done, please?
Robert, did you want to pick that up?
Yeah, just to say, we don't actually control that, Councillor Bond. But I've asked on your behalf and on the committee's behalf. But I can chase that one up, therefore. But we don't. I'm sort of just the conduit for on this particular one.
Of course.
But I'll chase that up for you.
Thank you very much. It'll be much easier to see. Then we can relate things. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. I know you've asked that before, so I know Robert will pass that on again. Thank you. So we're moving on to the item 9 on the agenda, which is the minutes of first of all, the 9th of July. And if there are any issues of concern, Councillor Bond.
Sorry, so linking to what we've just said, so on our forward plan for the 18th, so it's economy, employment and skills strategy, should that then link back to, should it be on the forward work plan? Is that how it works? Should it be there, and that's where we picked it up from? Should everything that comes to us, well, not obviously extra questions, but any strategies or reports or whatever, be directly seen on that council forward plan, please?
Sorry, Councillor Bond, I'd assumed that was on the council forward plan, but if it's not, I don't remember off the top of my head at what point that's come to us to feature in in our next meeting. So I'd have to go away and check because I can't quite remember the chain of events leading up to it.
That should be the link then. So if we don't see it there, we should say, well, it's not there. I mean, I only read it through quickly, so I might have missed it. So I was just really checking the process, and the process is it goes on that plan, then we pick from there, saying, let's have that, but let's also have these things that are not on there. So any reports, whatever, should be on there. Thank you.
Yes, ordinarily, yeah. But as you say, you can also suggest as members something that's not on there. Yeah. But yeah, I'll look into that. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Thank you, Robert. So I'm coming back to item 9 and the minutes of the 9th of July. Are there any issues or changes or corrections? I see none. So we move the minutes, and then again for the minutes of the 15th of July. Same again. I see no issues. So I move, and they are done and dusted. So the next meeting is on the 18th of November, and look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks very much for staying the pace and for all your many questions. Much appreciated, and see you then.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Robert.